how this test is going to help us as coaches, and how can we improve as coaches going forward. Okay, so there are 4 aims and objectives for tonight. Okay, so to start off, before we get into it, I suppose we kind of have the sciencey stuff, the background to why we test and what is a skill in a sport. Okay, so just a simple definition for a skill in sport is a learned ability to bring about a predetermined result with maximum certainty, often with minimum outlay of time or energy or both. So in layman's terms, if we apply that to hurling, so a learned ability could be a simple skill like a row lift. So if we practice that enough times, we know the predetermined result is that we're going to effectively row lift the ball. Okay, so if we practice skills over and over again, we'll become more efficient and more skillful at them. Okay, so that means that if we keep practicing over and over again, that eventually this skill will be easily done without any outlay of time or energy or both. So that's when it comes to the sort of elite level of sport, that this skill will be nearly second nature, and that when you're under that pressure, under that time constraints, that the skill will be effective. Okay, so just this kind of second part of our skill section is the 7 steps for mastering a skill. So there's a lot of kind of information on this picture. We won't get too bogged down on it, but if we stay on the left where the pyramid is, you can see down the very bottom, number 1 is performing the skill, and number 2 is performing very well. So if we take hurling for the example tonight, this will be kind of like our Go Games age group, our 8s and 10s, where we're starting to learn the skills of hurling. Okay, where we're starting to learn the ground strike, when we're starting to learn the catch. Okay, so this is saying, can the athlete perform the skill? Can the player perform it? As a coach, kind of all the information is coming from us, so we're instructing them what to do. So that's at the very, very early age group. And then as we go up the steps, we perform the skill at speed, under fatigue, under pressure. So that can be pressure from an opponent or under time pressure. And then the final step at the very top is pressure consistently in competition conditions. Okay, so again, that's our elite level players at the very highest inter-county level. Okay, so just for tonight, we kind of decided that our hurling wall skills test kind of falls under 4 and 5 on the mastering a skill level, because we'll see as we go through it that we have to perform the skill very well. Okay, so you'll see that the test itself is quite difficult. So it is for our youth age group, and it's quite hard to get top marks. So they'll be under a lot of pressure to successfully do it, which is what we want. There is a small bit of fatigue. We kind of find out when we're running through the test that lads there was a small bit of fatigue near the end, that as you go through it, you do fatigue, and that does affect the skill that you're doing, each part of the test. Okay, so we'll move on. Now we'll throw this out to the group first, before we get into it. So why do we test our players? So if you want to open up the chat there, and any reason at all. So when we're talking about a skills test, why would you do that with your players? So James, if you keep an eye on the chat there, and we'll see what answer comes in. So a short sentence, why would we test our players as coaches?
We'll be calling upon a few people if there's no comments, but I'm sure there will be loads. So Caroline's in first there with see where they are at ability wise and skills wise. Yeah, perfect. Owen comes in, motivate players to improve. Yeah, so if you give them a graph of where they're at, where they're going to, it should give you some motivation to move on. Benchmark players, yeah. To focus on our next training session. That's spot on, M. Dwyer. So you can build your session around your skills evaluation, basically, what he's trying to say there. Tom Fitz to see what we can improve on, exactly. see where you're at coaching level. That's actually a very good point. So we as coaches are often very oblivious to our own pitfalls, that we kind of see past our own objectives, and it'll give us some blinkers to see where we need to go ourselves. Yeah, it's a very good point, Caroline. Robert Clifford comes in with understand where they are and how they may improve. Exactly. I think they're all very valid points, and at least we're all basically on the same page for the rest of the presentation.
Exactly. So if we move on to the next part, yeah. So I think a lot of us, just looking at the chat there, we're kind of, a lot of us as coaches, we're hitting the nail on the head. Our first point there, it kind of ties in with our TURIS principles. So I'm sure a lot of coaches on the call are familiar with TURIS, from our GPOs doing work in the club. The first letter obviously in TURIS stands for testing and challenging. So hopefully this Hurling Wall skills test will fit nicely into the player pathway, and we'll test the players at the older end of the age groups. The second point there, so it provides an overview of team skills. So as someone said, yeah, it shows where we're at as a team. So what our skill levels are like. It shows what your coaching ability is like. Okay, where our team is. The second line, baseline data. Okay, or a benchmark. So from the first time we do these tests, this will hopefully give you a benchmark in your club for that age group. So if you do the tests with the minor hurlers this year in 2020, you'll hopefully be able to judge the scores of the minor hurlers in 2025 and see how they match up. Okay, obviously this is to test players. You use them as monitoring the players. So see, do they progress or even regress? So as hopefully their skills, if they improve them, they'll obviously get better scores of the tests as we go along. Okay. We test obviously to provide feedback. So feedback to the players themselves, would be able to give them feedback on what skills they have to work on, and it gives us as coaches feedback on what way we can direct our coaching sessions. And that's the final point there at the bottom. James, anything else on that?
No, I think that's basically everything nailed in the head. I think Graham Maher, he wants to ask a question. You have your hand up, Graham, if you want to open up your mic.
No, that was sorry, that was I couldn't find the chat, so I put my hand up for the first question there a few minutes ago. Sorry about that.
Graham,
take that down.
No matter. Yeah, so I think Porky probably hit all the points there in the head, that there's testing is not just to see for like how good we are on that day. It's to provide us feedback, to monitor our players and get a baseline data of where we are and where we need to go. So it directs our coaching sessions. So that's everything basically, yeah.
Yeah, and I think another important point before we move on is that sometimes as coaches we can test players, be it fitness testing or skills testing, and we kind of leave it to one side and we never come back to it. So obviously tests should be done at a regular basis, once or twice a year, especially skills, to see where we are. So this is really important, that hopefully this test will be used a couple of times a year to help players and coaches as we go along. Okay, so obviously this is a Hurling Wall skills test. We just have the list of clubs. I'm sure I probably forgot someone somewhere. Hopefully I didn't. So it's great to see that we have 13 clubs with hurling skills walls or skills walls in the county. They're a great facility to have. I know from my own club we have one, and it's at the start of every training, lads just go out and start pucking the ball against the wall, and you're working on your skills straight away. So it's actually great to see so many facilities in the county, and hopefully all the clubs on the list, with the help of their GPOs and with their coaches, that will be able to roll out this skills test and all of them. So before we get into it, this is one kind of question we want to throw out to the group again. So this will tie in with the background of the tests, which is on the next slide. But we decided to throw this in here, myself and James. Meath versus Kilkenny. So what separates our skill set? So if we think of the skills of, say, a 13-year-old hurler, we'll use that as an example. What separates the skill set of a Meath 13-year-old player to a Kilkenny 13-year-old player. Okay, so James, you'll keep an eye on the chat for me.
100%, yeah. Just throw them up, guys. So if you were to look at a minor Kilkenny hurler and a Meath Kilkenny hurler at minor level, what's the main differences you would see if you were looking at them in the game on the pitch? First touch, speed of application, first touch speed, hurling hand from baby in Kilkenny. There's plenty of lads and girls and Meath with hurls in their hand since they were babies. Fergal says football. That can be a factor, yeah. The speed of doing the skill. Kilkenny is sport specific. Teams tend to have many interests in sports. In Kilkenny, you have a lot of soccer as well. You'd have to add role models.
I know we could get into a debate about different aspects, but this question, we're talking about the skills of the player. So what differentiates skills? So your 13-year-old hurler from Meath and your 13-year-old hurler from Kilkenny. What differentiates them?
Tom O'Connell, their ability to repeat skill consistently. So that to me is probably more or less, it's a nail in the head, that hurlers down in Kilkenny will repeat until they get it perfect. And as we've seen in our graph, they'll hit it at a speed, match pace, under pressure, under fatigue. Whereas I know for myself and Park, probably he'll say this as well, that we'll practice our skills once or twice a month even when we're training, and we'll leave it at that and think we have a job done. Eamon Murphy, 7 days a week versus just at training. That's basically it kind of follows on from what I'm just after saying, Eamon, yeah.
Yeah, so we can see from the chat that I suppose kind of speed and execution of the skill, they're kind of the main two that differentiates both groups of players. Like it's the same hurley, same ball that we're using, but the repetitive practice of it and then the speed and the execution of the skill, that's what differentiates both groups. Okay, so if we move on, before we go into the test, how did this come about? So just a little background to this test. I suppose it kind of stems from our High Kings program, and I know that we've a few coaches from outside the county on this webinar. So if they're not familiar, our High Kings, it's a pre-development squad kind of super game centre that we use in the county. So it's for our under 12s and under 13s club hurlers. It's informal, so clubs are asked to send in as up to 5 or 6 players for your under 12 or under 13 age group into us in the county. So myself and James and Peter Dernan, who started the programme about 7 or 8 years ago, we run that usually on a Saturday morning throughout the summer months. Unfortunately, we didn't get to do it this year because of COVID, but it's a great programme and the lads love it. We do have up to 80, 90 kids over 2 slots, so you could have 180 kids on a Saturday morning between under 12s and under 13s. So it's great to have so many hurlers and expose them to probably a slightly higher level than they would if they were just playing games in their club. So that was one of the reasons behind this test, to kind of challenge those lads. The second point there, lockdown thinking. So I suppose a lot of us we'd a bit of extra time over lockdown to think of ideas, and Christine O'Brien from Coaching and Games would have approached me to see if there was anything we could do for hurling walls specifically, and especially for the older age groups, for 13s to minor, so that youth age group. So we picked that, and we decided to make it challenging because we want to improve the standard between under 13s and minor in the county. We want to kind of bridge the gap to other counties. So from our High Kings program, we'd see that we do have you'd have a lot of stronger hurlers at club level. So there would be 2 or 3 boys that are very strong when they come in, and then when they start playing county games, as they go up the levels, they kind of struggle because they're probably used to lording it at club level, and when it comes to county level, their probably skills aren't quick enough, even though they think they are from club level. And then kind of the last point is just to utilise the facilities. So from the previous couple of pages, we've 13 clubs with hurling walls in the county, and we probably don't use them enough. And I suppose under current restrictions where you're not allowed to do contact sessions or anything like that, a hurling wall skill session is ideal. So hopefully this test will come into use over the next few weeks for any clubs that are still at it. James, do you want to expand on any of them?
Part the hurling walls in the county, I can nearly guarantee that most clubs use them flat out for the first month and a half, 2 months, and then they run out of ideas. Or what can we actually do in this? Or what drills, or how often should we use it? So this is just giving us kind of another aspect of how it can be utilized. So by all means, use this test on a regular basis, and we'll be giving you some more. We have a book. The Dublin County Hurlers have a book. Dublin Coaching Games have a hurling wall book out, so we can send on the link for that as well.
Okay. Right, before we get into it, so this is just the setup of the test. So the idea when we're thinking up this program or this skills test was to keep it as simple as possible. Obviously to keep it standardized, because a good test has to be standardized to make sure it stands up to the rigors of the testing. We made it simple so coaches could easily lay it out and it doesn't take up too much time. So just from the picture here, you can see the hurling wall at the top. Okay, so it literally only takes 5 cones. That's all the test is to set it up. So the first cone, the blue cone, is 2 meters from the wall. Our second cone, the yellow cone, is 4 meters. And then the red cone, which is the furthest away, is 6 meters from the wall. Okay, so it's 3 cones in a straight line. Then in line with the yellow cone in the middle, out 4 meters each side are 2 white cones. Okay, so it's very simply set up. And obviously, if we were to repeat it out throughout the couple of times a year, we'd easily set it up again and again. James, I think you.
Sorry, just a second there. The screen never moved on. Can everyone see a slide with 4 cones and arrows with meters on them?
Yep.
Okay, maybe just your own computer, Fergal. Sorry. Yeah. All right, fire on, Park.
Sorry, yeah, no, I was just going to say, James, that you've tried this test with a club. What did you kind of think of the setup? Is it easy to set up and start?
Say that again, sorry.
You've set the test up with a club already, so you've done a trial run. So what do you think of the setup? Is it easy to go?
Yeah, 100%. I did it with Rathmalline Hurling Club there. They'd be in South Meath there. I did it last week, and I had it set up ready to go, flying ahead, and I found myself under pressure for time because I was giving everyone an extra practice chance. So on the other side of the wall, I gave another coach the 5 cones, and off he went. He set up. I gave him a piece of paper, and he was able to do it very easily. So from him seeing it on the ground on a piece of paper within 5 minutes, he was able to get set up. So that'll show you how easy it is.
Yeah, and that's kind of the big takeaway we want from tonight, that the test is kind of going to be presented through pictures. Obviously, videos kind of sometimes don't work in presentations, so we decided to go through this route of pictures. Ideally, obviously, if there was no restrictions, we could do a workshop in a club and invite all the coaches in the county down, and we could run through a practical session of it. But obviously, restrictions don't allow us to do that. So hopefully for tonight, that we'll get through it. We'll understand what way we want to set it up, how it runs, and if you have any questions, you can email myself or James anyway afterwards. Okay, so that's just our setup. To move on to the test itself, it's split into 4 parts. Okay, so part 1 is at the blue cone, 2 meters from the wall. Part 1 is at the blue cone. Part 2 is at the yellow cone, 4 meters from the wall. Part 3 is at the red cone, and part 4 is at the white cone, parallel to the wall. So you'll be going across the. Okay, so from left to right. Part 1, 2, and 3 are just stepped out from the wall, and you'll see now as we go through each section how they work. Okay, so part one. So part one in our test is the short grip strike. So it's 60 seconds. You start at the blue cone, which is 2 meters from the wall, and you're striking alternative sides at the wall. Okay, the ball must be taken into the hand to count. Okay, so if there's any touch on the stick at all, it has to be taken straight into the hand to count. Okay, the touch on the stick, we won't count that as a score. Okay, part one is the only part of the test that's timed. So you have 60 seconds, and it's as many short grip strikes as you can in 60 seconds. The emphasis obviously is on a short, firm strike. Sometimes we'll see when we're trialing the test itself that some players kind of, I suppose, a shoveling motion at the wall. So they're kind of lobbing the ball up to make it come back high so they can catch it. Obviously, that'll slow them down and affect their score. So we want to emphasize a short, firm strike at the wall, hard at the wall, so the ball comes straight back to your hand. To tie this back into the high kings, I suppose we probably see some bad habits of players coming in, and maybe one of them is not being able to shorten their stick and strike the ball. Okay, so you'd have a lot of lads who are well able to strike with it with the long grip on the hurl, but it's a skill in itself to be able to strike a short grip. So that's why part one is in this test, that it's a left and right strike, firm strike at the wall, and to take it back into the hand. And taking it back into the hand, I suppose, is the second takeaway point from the High Kings, that a lot of lads, especially in this county, like to take a touch on the hurl. Okay, to get away with it at club level, but we want to emphasise that ball into the hand, because we always tell them that the best first touch you can take as a hurler is the ball into the hand. Okay, so that's part one from our blue cone. 60 seconds, short grip strike, left and right side, and it's as many strikes as you can get in 60 seconds. Okay, so part two. James, you want to go with this one?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so part two is you're moving back to the yellow cone, and you're striking at the wall, you're moving towards it, and you're catching it. You do 5 on the left and 5 on the right. And the emphasis on attacking the ball and getting the ball back to the hand, and the ball must be taken in the hand or inside the blue, or inside the blue cone. So what we're trying to get here is that you're not striking the ball and admiring yourself and admiring how you're after hitting the ball, that you're striking the ball, you're attacking the ball as it comes back to you, and you're collecting it as close to the blue cone as you can. Tying it back into the High Kings, you'd have to say that most lads at 12, 13 years of age strike the ball and they think they're a great lad and it's gone 100 yards or maybe even 40 yards, instead of striking the ball and then going again for the return, maybe for off the shoulder. So it's one thing we kind of identified that need to be worked on. It was striking the ball and not waiting for things to happen, that you go and make things happen again. And
yeah, exactly.
One thing that I actually found on doing the Rathmaline test was that lads thought they were still under the clock. So they were hitting the ball at the wall, running back, hitting out the ball at the wall again, and they were wrecked by the 5th shot, where they can hit the ball out the wall, run in, collect it, they can walk back, gather themselves, go again. And that's not to give them 30 or 40 seconds to chill out and relax. It's just let them gather their breath and assert themselves and go again.
Yeah, so just I kind of want to emphasize the bottom point there. So the ball must be taken into the hand on or inside the blue cone. So the minute you strike it from the yellow cone, you're moving forward towards the wall. Okay, so you're attacking the ball and the ball comes straight to your hand. So again, if you take a touch on the stick, it won't count, and the ball has to be taken clean into the hand to count as one of your 10 scores. The blue cone obviously is 2 meters from the wall. So if you strike it hard at the wall, it is going to be a challenge to get into the blue cone in time to collect the ball into the hand. But that's exactly what we want. We want to challenge the lads to attack the ball, not to be waiting for it in games or in training. So the minute you strike it, you're moving fast towards the ball and you're collecting it on the blue or inside the blue. Okay, so that's part two. Just to move on to part three. So this is from the red cone. So you're moving right back out. You're now 6 meters from the wall, from the hurling wall. So this is our first touch kind of test. So it's similar to the part two, but this time you're striking the ball low and hard at the wall. Okay, and the minute you strike it, you're moving towards it, and you have to collect it inside the yellow. Okay, so again, we're promoting attacking the ball. So the minute you strike it, you're moving towards the ball. Okay, you see a lot of lads standing waiting for the ball to come to them, but this re-emphasizes them striking the ball at the wall and you moving towards it. And again, the first touch has to be in or on the yellow cone or inside the yellow cone. So inside is from 4 meters or closer to the wall. Okay, so again, we're emphasizing a good first touch. We kind of seen when I was trialing this with a few lads that they probably weren't striking the ball hard enough, so it was kind of too easy for them. So we'd really want to emphasize that hard strike at the wall. So the harder you strike it, obviously the faster the ball is going to come back and it'll challenge them more. So really emphasize the good hard strike at the wall and then them attacking the ball as well.
Just one, I'd add something to this as well that I noticed on the first few lads in Rathmullen was that they were hitting the ground. They were hitting the ball off the ground first, then the wall, so it'd come up at head height and it'd take it nice and clean. So what we would try to do is, if they can hit the ball low at the wall, and try to hit the wall first, so then they're working on the touch rather than the easy ball hopping up into the sky and they're catching it. So just one thing to look out for that I noticed.
Perfect. Okay, so part 4, so this is the final part. Again, so from our setup, this is going parallel, going from white. So this is about striking on the run and catching. Again, it's 5 on the right, 5 on the left, so a score out of 10. So we want them to strike the ball firm on the run at the wall and to take it straight back into the hand. There's no specific point of where they have to strike it. They can strike it anywhere they want in between the 2 white cones. But we wanted them collecting the ball straight back into the hand. Okay, so this part of the test obviously promotes them striking on the run, on both sides. Something we'd struggle with, as youth players, and then obviously to take that ball into the hand. So to get them out of that bad habit of trying to take everything on the stick. Okay, that they'll get away with at club level. We want to improve these lads to go up the levels and to improve the standard. So taking that ball straight into the hand after they strike it firm at the wall, on the run. James, anything on that from your test that you did?
Yeah, one or two things I noticed that on the first or second strike, the lads will notice that they have to hit the ball, and that it'll take their eye 1 or 2 strikes just to get used to the moving ball. So lads were hitting the ball and it was either going way too ahead of them or coming behind them. So it will take them 1 or 2 strikes to get into it, but after that it should be clean sailing after that. It's just, as Paul said, you need to emphasize the strike, so that they can't be just tapping the ball. It has to be a good, clean, true strike to get the ball back onto them, and the test is set up for that to happen.
Yeah, and I think on that point, I think the best thing to do is if there's a spot in the wall, tell them to pick that spot, and that's where they strike at, and the ball will come back to your hand. Okay, so some lads might lob it up too high, and the ball's coming lobbing back really slowly. That's not what we want. Okay, we want them to strike it firm, head height at the wall, so it'll come back straight into their hand. Okay, so that'll be up to coaches, up to us as coaches to observe it, and we'll know ourselves if it's a good test that's been done, or if lads are kind of trying to cheat their way around it. But it's up to us to be strict on the scoring, and it show exactly what we want. Okay, so there are 4 parts of the test. If anyone has any questions, throw them into the chat. The next part, we just have a short video there. I'm not sure if it's going to play. This will be sent out to everyone afterwards. Okay, so this is just kind of a run through of what it looks like. Okay, so you'll see the different stages. There's only about 2 or 3 strikes of each stage. The starting point, the finish point of each stage as well.
You won't be able to get they won't be able to get the real kind of feeling of it because it's so jumpy. But as Bart said, we'll be sending this out, so you'll be able to see it in full motion. And
yeah, anyone who signed up to the webinar, will be sending out a kind of file with a load of things in it, and the short video will be one of them anyway. So you'll be able to see what it looks like when it's running through.
I'd say all in all, it takes about probably 4 to 5 minutes per person to complete the test. So you want to give yourself, if you're doing 30 lads, you want to give yourself a good bit of time.
Yeah, and on that, it depends obviously on the size of your hurling wall. You could have 2 or 3 coaches with this setup and 2 or 3 stations along it, and you could fly through a team. You could have this done. Some lads, a team could be training, and you could have this set up, and one coach could take a few lads out at a time. That's what I did personally with one of my clubs, to trial it. So, and that seemed to work out well. And as James said, about 5 or 6 minutes per person per player, should be time enough to do it all. Just onto our second.
Tom, wait just a second there, Pork.
Sorry.
Tom O'Connell has a question on part 4. Any preference on which hand to catch it with?
So we'd obviously say they're obviously your catching hand. So if you're striking, you're running across, striking on your right, we always want them to take it with their catching hand. Okay, we don't want them to take their dominant hand off the hurl. We have some sort of bad habits like that with club players. So we're always trying to emphasize catching hand, hurley hand. So for this test, it's always emphasizing that catching hand. So their dominant hand is at the top of the hurl, and all of these ball to hand scores have to be into their catching hand.
There's very few hurlers in the country, never mind this county, that can hit perfectly on both sides. And probably the perfect example of someone that can do that is Walter Welsh. He's so fluent on both sides, but as we know, he's an enigma. He's a special talent. So we'd encourage everyone to catch in hand, early hand.
Perfect. So just to move on to the scoring. So as I mentioned earlier, we'll send out a file to everyone, everyone's email who's on the call or on the webinar, and we'll put in a blank template of the scorecard. This is just a sample one we had done already, that we used kind of for trialing the hurling wall test. So this one was filled out. This one was done with a minor squad. Just to have a quick look at the scores. You can see part 1, that's out of your 60 seconds. So how many short grip strikes you can do in 60 seconds. Part 2, 3 and 4 are all out of 10. And then the total score is that those 3 added up out of 30. All right. From the first part 1, for a minor player, I think 40 and above is a good score. So we can see from this example, there's 2 lads who achieved that. James, what do you think from doing the test? What's a good score for maybe an under 13 player?
Under 13, in and around 25 to 30. And anything above 30 is exceptional for a under 13 player. Anything around 25 to 20 or even 20 is a good score, because they just wouldn't be as quick as the older lads.
Yeah, and we can actually see in this test that from part 2, 3, and 4, that part 4, the strike on the run, that is the difficult one. Some of the scores kind of drop down there for that, but overall, you'll be able to use these scores as your kind of baseline data, as your benchmark, and hopefully you can see the improvements going up the age groups as you test them again.
Sorry, just a question, Jess. Is it only part 1? Yes. So part 1 is you have your minute for your strike, alternating strikes in either hand, and then the rest of them is not timed. So they, from doing the part 1, they'll feel like they're under pressure, but just remind them that they're not under the clock for part 2, 3, or 4. At the same time, they're not there to stay there all day. So just set themselves back up and do the next strike.
Yeah, I suppose the test is kind of we're focusing on the kind of skill execution itself, and to get that right. So we'll probably once they improve, I'd suggest nearly once they improve at the test, that they could be put under a bit more pressure doing it then. So that's where you could that's where the time pressure could come into. But at the start, it's by just getting the execution of the skill, working on all those things that we're trying to emphasize. So that firm strike at the wall, left and right, attacking the ball and taking the ball into the hand. They're kind of our 3 key takeaways that we want to use from this test.
So Seamus, so when does part 2, 3, and 4 end? So part 1 is 60 seconds. Part 2 is 10 strikes, so 5 on either side. Part 3 is the same, 5 on either side. And part 4 again is 5 on either side, so 5 on the left, 5 on the right. So whenever them strikes end, that's when they move on to part 2, 3, or 4.
Perfect. Okay, yeah, so where to next? So as we said already, that a kind of photo of each part of the test will be emailed out along with the short video we did up, the picture to set up, and a blank scorecard. So hopefully all those resources that you'll get sent out will help you get started, and you can trial the test yourself with your own team if you're involved with a team. And any feedback from the test would be grateful. We'll send out our emails at the bottom of those emails as well, so that you can send any feedback back to us. If your club has a GPO, get in touch with them, and they could do the test themselves with their clubs, with their club they're involved with. I think we trialed it with 3 clubs already, and the feedback has been good. So if your club has a GPO, get in touch with them, and I'm sure they can do a hurling wall test as a session. As I said earlier, the hurling wall itself and this test, it's great for this time of the year because we're not allowed to do any contact sessions. So if you've time to do a session and you want to get players out and involved, this time of year is a good time to test them. Then you can test them at the start of next year and maybe a couple more times then during the year as well. Sorry, James. Yeah, go ahead.
Caroline has a question. Would you recommend doing similar for Go Games ages adapted for age?
Yeah, that's something that we definitely be interested in. We said we target this older age group at the minute because there probably isn't enough stuff out there for them. But yeah, that's something that definitely we could work on in the pipeline to do a hurling wall skills test for the younger age groups. Absolutely. Just on the final point then there, the additional resources. So obviously social media is a great resource to have, and you'll find loads of good stuff on that if you follow the right people. YouTube as well. So while I was kind of researching this test, I suppose I was trawling through YouTube, and there's loads of good hurling wall skill sessions from the likes of Paddy Butler, and there's a few from Cork GA as well. So there's great hurling wall skill sessions that can be utilised by us as club coaches. James, on any of those?
I'll just jump into another question here. Eamon Murphy, what sliotar would you recommend? Size 4 or 5 or specific ball wall sliotar? When I did my test in Rathmaline, I used a normal size 4 or 5 depending on the age group. If you have a ball wall sliotar, you can use it, but the lads would be used to, unless they're on the hurling wall day in, day out, I would keep them using their size 4 or 5 because that's what they're used to playing games. What do you think, Borg?
Yeah, so any of the tests we did, we would have done it with the sliotar relevant to the age group. So if it was size 4 or size 5, depending on the age. Yeah, so I suggest that's the easiest way. That kind of standardised the test, because I know a lot of clubs wouldn't have access to loads of wall balls or anything like that. So our sliotar is probably the safest one to use to keep, so the test is standardised and we keep the results fair.
Perfect. Yeah, on the additional resources, I kind of touched on earlier on. Dublin Coaching Games have a hurling wall training booklet, if you want to call it that. We don't have the link here, I don't think, but we will send on the link in the pack we're going to send after this.
Yeah, just to add on to that, additional resources, we kind of threw this man in here near the end, Martin Fogarty. So he's the hurling development officer in the country. He's doing a load of good stuff at the minute. So he's doing a webinar series for hurling. I think there's kind of webinars, and they vary from nursery all the way up to adult level, so managing adult players. Some of them are available on YouTube already, some of the webinars he's done. We threw this in here at the end because Martin is actually offering to do a webinar specific for a club. So if your club are interested in doing a webinar, you can reply back to myself or James when we send out the resources for this Hurling Wall Skills Test. And if we get enough clubs in, we might draw a few together and get Martin in on a webinar, and it would be great for him to host one in the county. Specifically the child and youth skills, that obviously these could tie in with what we're doing at the minute with the Hurling Wall test. So if anyone is interested, get back to us on that, and we'd be delighted to put a webinar together with Martin and a few of our GPOs to sit in on it as well.
Yeah, if you can, guys, I would check out Martin Fogarty's page. He's like just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to hurling, so check him out if you haven't already. So any questions, if you want to type your name and we can open up your mic. Don't be shy. Doesn't seem to be any coming in, Park. Probably got away lightly.
Okay, yeah, well, before we wrap up, if anyone does have any questions, again, all those resources will be emailed out to anyone on the call. So if you do have any questions, just reply back to myself or James. Again, if you're interested in the Martin Fogarty webinar, let us know as well. Hopefully the test works out well. It's new. It's something different that we haven't done in the county before. So hopefully it's going to challenge our youth players, and it'll hopefully increase the star, improve the standard as well. That was kind of our main aim setting out. So hopefully you get use of it as a coach, and it'll bring something else to you as to your coaching sessions. Before we finish,
just one thing, Park. Fergal Lennon, if you want to open up your mic.
Yeah, hi guys. Just not particularly relevant to my age group, but just wondering, is it a good idea to feedback results of the test to the players?
Yeah, I'll go on this one. Yeah, I would definitely, maybe not on the first one, but on the second one, you can let them know that they've maybe improved 4 or 5 points, or whatever the number is. It's always great. Players love feedback. So if you can go a whole year and not give a player feedback, he's not going to really learn anything other than the skills they're doing on the pitch. But if you can say to a player, right, you were able to hit the ball 10 times off your left and 10 times off your right this time, but last time you missed 3 or 4, so you have to improve in 3 or 4 points since the last time. Look at yourself. What did you do differently, and how often did you practice? So players love feedback because it gives them something to aim at.
Right, cheers.
No worries.
Yeah, just to follow on from that, James. Yeah, yeah, as you said, maybe not for the first one, but obviously if you see there might be kind of a trend in the scores for your team, maybe they're weaker at striking on their left side on the run or something like that. So it's feedback that you could give individually, or you give to the whole team, and obviously then you could bring that into the teams of your sessions as well. So absolutely, as you said, give feedback. Players love it, and it's good for our coaches as well. So guys, just before we wrap up, just thanks everyone for tuning in. You can follow Meath Coaching on any of the social media platforms there. So our tagline is @MeathCoaching on Twitter. There's loads of good work going on within the county, from hurling, football, schools coaching, interacting with clubs as well. So I suggest anyone who doesn't follow us on that and see all the good work that we do. So from myself, I'd like to say thank you to anyone for tuning in. James, just before we go, anything else?
No, yeah, just I found it very good for myself as well, and hopefully everyone enjoyed it, and we can go out and spread the word of hurling throughout the county and otherwise. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, lads. That was great. Thanks. Bye.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Bye bye.
Thanks, that's very good.
Thanks.